I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. And what you're going to learn today is how to fix this. I hope. Here's the situation. I went to California for quad camp, and they have a lot of desert sand and dust out there. I don't know how you guys do it who live out there. Your motors must get trashed so much. But it wasn't actually the desert sand and dust that trashed my motors. No, in fact, one of the things I've learned from flying in that environment is that if your motor, you'll land and your motor will seem completely gummed up. But if you just kind of go, the dust kind of falls out. And then once you get the motor mostly free, you arm it and spin them just, and actually they're good as new. A lot of times the sand just falls right out. So number one, if you're a beginner and you've got that situation going on, don't freak out. Don't take your motor apart. Just go work it out and it'll be fine. So then why are my motors going to be disassembled and cleaned out today? Because I landed in, well, I think it's basically just like rust dust. And it's magnetic, which means that the magnets, it's actually stuck in the motors. In fact, when I first did it, you could actually see on the motors where the magnets were because the dust was kind of collecting where the magnets were, and you're not going to shake that out. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the bell off and we're going to clean the magnetic dust out. How do you get this magnetic dust off of the magnets? I'll show you. But there's a catch here. And that is that these motors have screw shafts, which actually makes them really easy to maintain. It's true. You just get your screwdriver down there and take the screw out, and then the bell comes off. In a lot of cases, you don't even need to take the motor base off the arm, and that's wonderful. But these screws come from the factory with Loctite on them, or some equivalent thing. And it's not the kind of Loctite that you can just bust loose with a twist of your wrist. And if you've ever had a motor screw break off, if you just go in there with this driver and you try and just back this screw out, a lot of times it'll just twist off in your hand. So how do you get it loose? And the answer is with the application of heat. And in this case, a soldering iron is the best way to do it. Now, we're going to crank the soldering iron all the way up to max, right? The goal here is just to get this thing as freaking hot as possible. Don't crank it up so high that you smoke the tip on your iron and ruin it, but that certainly will help. And the other thing you can do is you can get just a little bit of solder on the tip to help make electrical or a thermal conductivity between the tip and the screw. But you don't want to get solder on your bearing or get solder in the screw head or anything like that. So maybe don't go crazy with the solder. The real question though is, how do you know when you've applied enough heat? And the answer is there's no universal answer. What I suggest you do is, if you've never broken a screw head off, the next time you ruin a motor through some other reason, take a minute and take it apart. It's ruined already. And just try and twist that screw out without heating it or anything. And hopefully you'll break the head off, because once you've felt that happen, it's actually really distinct. What happens is that you're twisting and the tension kind of builds and then suddenly goes to nothing. And you're like, oh, I just twisted the head off. Whereas when you've caused the thread locker to release, it'll be a little bit tight to turn, but it'll be it'll rise and then plateau. And then as you turn the screw, it won't rise anymore. So you kind of just got to learn to feel for that. Oh, I'm about to twist the head off. I need to stop. Just how much tension you can apply. But in general, you probably aren't going to what are you going to overheat it? It's a giant hunk of metal. Your little soldering iron probably isn't going to smoke anything. So be generous with the heating. Now let's see if I can even get in here with my soldering iron tip without touching this carbon, because the carbon will of course suck heat away. But if you do this right, I'm just going to get in there. Yeah, I should be okay. If you do this right, you may even feel the shaft begin to warm up. And it's just going to be a little bit. This is a lot of metal to heat up. Oh, I'm always looking for any opportunity to get my flare gun out. And look. Okay, now there is one of the motors. Now here's... You can totally see how hot it's gotten. Okay. I can feel it slipping here. Yep, I can feel it slipping, and it feels, it didn't just, again, you just got to sort of calibrate for how much tension you can put on it before you twist the head off. It's not easy. I mean, it's just a matter of experience. Once you've felt it, you'll know. But it came on out. Fantastic. You're going to want to make sure you don't lose this brass bushing here on a lot of motors that are, these are relatively new motors. If the motor's pretty old, the bushing may actually be worn thin and almost worn through. If you can source spare bushings, it would be a good time to replace them. If you can't, you can put them back on. You definitely do need the bushings though. Now that the screw is out, you have to separate the bell from the base. And this is one reason why I actually prefer to have the motor mounted on an arm, because the magnets are actually surprisingly strong. And it's really hard to get the bell away from the base. In fact, I had a motor once that I accidentally lost the shaft screw, and I did a whole flight, full acro, no holding back. And it was only at the very end of the flight when I bonked something that the bell just went whoosh and flew off. The magnets are really strong. So having the motor mounted onto an arm gives you something to grip, and you can just pull it right off. I hope. There we go. Ooh. Yeah, okay. I wasn't 100% sure that was going to happen. On brand new motors, there actually can be such tight tolerances in the shaft and stuff that it can be really hard to get the bell off even with leverage. But if you just pull straight away, it'll come right off. So here, of course, is the stator and the base, and that's easy to clean out. In fact, don't go crazy with this. Don't be like squirting it full of WD-40 or anything, because you'll take the grease out of these bearings. They're not like fully sealed bearings, because high RPM bearings are usually not fully sealed, but they're shrouded bearings, and they mostly do a pretty good job of keeping dust and dirt out. If you squirt like a solvent in there, it'll take the grease out, and then they'll be dry, and then you'll have a problem. So just leave those alone. Maybe get in there with a nylon bristle brush and brush away any dust. But in general, the stator, I mean, if you look at it, you can see it. There's nothing as long as you don't damage the winding, is pretty much just going to take care of itself. So what we really need to do is we need to get this goop out of this. And you can see it in there, and it is, I mean, it's stuck in there. It's not just dust or dirt, so it's actually magnetic. Now, one way to do this, if you have access to compressed air, you can blow this out with compressed air, and it just takes it away. If you don't have access to compressed air, the next best thing is to get some of this blue tack. And this stuff is so good for so many things. You don't have to use blue tack. You can use silly putty or any kind of putty-like substance, and you're just going to get in there, and you're going to start. It's going to take it out. It's going to stick there, and it's going to help clean it out. And that is how you get this magnetic dirt out of here. If what you have is non-magnetic dirt, well, you don't even have to disassemble the motor, to be honest. Like I said. Now this is, of course, going to be ruined, but it's not that expensive. And I'll put a link to it down in the video description. I'm just going to get it up in there and pull it out. That's practically good as new. Now, if you've never been inside a motor before, you may notice that there is some compound up in here, like right here. It's a little hard to point with the magnets pulling on my tweezers. And maybe right, let's see. Yeah, right here, some dark compound. That is balancing mud. They call it mud. I don't know why. It's used at the factory to balance the bell. The bells are very precisely machined, but they're not perfectly balanced at 30,000 RPM. So they add this mud. And don't scrape that out or mess with that, because that'll make your motor be off balance. There's one more thing when reassembling this. When you reassemble it, the magnets are going to want to pull the bell back together with the stator. And it's going to want to smack down, and that's actually really bad for the bearing. So ideally you're going to want to try and let it on there gently, but it's actually a little hard to do because the magnets pull so freaking hard. Somewhere out there has a trick for how to do this gracefully, and I don't know what it is, but I just try to kind of, don't pinch your finger either. It'll pinch the crap out of your finger if you let it. Try to just come down gracefully here. There you go. Well, it's not good as new. It's way better than it was. Maybe I need to clean it some more. But I'm not going to make you sit here and watch while I clean out this junk from all 4 motors. That's going to do it for this video. Now, hopefully you know how to turn my soldering iron off. How to disassemble a motor with a screw shaft, and how to clean it out. Either if it's non-magnetic, just twist it and spin it until it cleans itself out. Or if it's magnetic, then use some of this goop right here. Link in the video description. That's going to do it for this video. What'd I miss? You got any tips for cleaning out motors? Let me know down in the comments. Happy flying.